good evening, everyone. This is the February 15th, 2023 meeting of the Solar and Battery Storage Moratorium Study Committee. It's at 5:30, and so let me just announce, just for the record, who's here. And I'll start with my right. Facing me, we have Rod Palmer, the building inspector. We have Tom Bott sitting at the end. We have John Gatsky, Jen Bogart, Bruce Mackey, Fran Mello, Connie Shea, and at the end of the table we have Sabri Moore and Steve Ward in front of the table, and last but not least is Roger Shores facing me. No, I've written all the names down. I always go, what? Geez, I forget who that is. Yeah. So, and I tried to write them the way that I thought that everybody would be lined up, but I forgot we were downstairs here. So, so everybody was sitting in a different position. So,
in case we have to vote, I have to leave at 6:45.
all right. Well, we'll see where we are at that time. All right, with that, let me turn the meeting over to Tom Bott.
All right, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this afternoon I sent out a way too big, way too busy email. I was going to work on this a bit more last night, and I got a text from the woman who was with me and said, "So when are you coming home for dessert?" So, because I want to sleep again there one of these days again. I left last night and didn't work much later. That's the planning board meeting. So my apologies for all the things you got today. So based on the email I put together, so what I sent you out and sort of in the line of things is the battery energy storage systems bylaw. We talked about this a bit. We had some questions to go over. I had some conversations with Deputy Chief Boyle, and so some of those questions about for the fire department have been addressed. And so let's kind of go through those. Try to regulate my Zoom on the screen here. So. Access roads. So one of the questions was about access, and so or one of the questions was, what does the fire department have to say? So one of the things we added in exit line 4 is access roads, and this is standard from all the fire department's proposals that they see. Access roads 12-foot wide, constructed of an all-weather surface, cleared of obstructions at least 2 feet on each side, 16-foot high vertical clearance maintained for larger vehicle access, access gates 12-foot wide, accessible to fire department via the department law, and access to all 4 sides of each closure should be provided where practical. I don't want to scroll past this because we're going to come back to it, but just below that is this statement. Tier 1 energy storage systems are allowed by right in all zoning districts. I think someone mentioned at the last meeting, we need to decide what districts these are permitted in. This is based on Midway's bylaw, and their bylaw said that. So I've got it highlighted here so I don't forget to come back to it. But right now, the use chart as well as the bylaw says Tier 1, the smaller ones are allowed in all districts by right. Tier 1. So, and I do have some additional graphics on the size of some of these facilities as well, but sticking with the subject matter at hand, these are the setbacks we talked about before. One of the questions, a minimum of 10 feet must be maintained if within a building between BSS components. That was an add-in from the fire department, I believe. Noise. There was a question last week about noise. So I checked in with a few folks and added the proposal line number 9. An acoustic study shall be provided in order to ensure that any increase in sound complies with Mass DEP requirements limiting an increase in ambient noise to be less than 10 decibels at the property line. That's DEP's standard language for things like that. The noise that we tend to hear from these things are from the HVAC units. They're used to cool the enclosures with the batteries in them, as well as some noise from a transformer. So those are HVAC noises and the hum from a transformer. The standard for DEP is there cannot be an increase in sound more than 10 decibels at the property line. And that is fairly standard, so we use that just to be consistent with what DEP regulates. Large-scale fire data, we had this question. Large-scale fire data, DSS systems is spacing between arrays of less than 3 feet. And we kind of asked, well, what does that mean? Jesse looked at it and said, well, that's the fire data. It doesn't deal with where things are at, arranged on the site. That's just a data question. So he was okay with that language because it's recording test data for fires and not necessarily the orientation of where these things are going to be at. We added in the decommissioning plan, like last time, a report describing the system's commissioning, including the initial test results required by applicable state codes, will be provided to the zoning officer and the Carver Fire Department prior to final inspection and approval. Emergency operations plan, we had a brief tweak here. A copy of the approved emergency plan. The question came up, well, who approves the emergency operations plan? So that's been changed to say a copy of the emergency operations plan approved by the Carver Fire Department shall be given to the systems owner. So we decided who approves that plan right off the bat because the Carver Fire Department will be on site for any of these things that happen to come up. And I think we talked about ownership last time, coming to you guys. So I think those are the changes that we looked at, the questions we had outstanding. So the fire department has weighed in about spacing, about the emergency plan, about access. And likely one of those questions we probably need to delve into is, where should these be in relationship to zoning districts in town? So I'm going to toggle over to the proposed use table. So right now, the use table, I said this is what was essentially pulled out of the Medway bylaw. Battery storage, tier 1, these are permitted in all zoning districts in Medway. That's what's proposed here. The battery 2, tier 2 in this proposal are permitted by special permit of the planning board in the Highway Commercial District, in Green Business Park, in IA, IB, and IC zoning districts, the Airport District, and the Innovation District. So those are the ones that I pulled out, just looking at sort of a commercial venture like this being in a commercially zoned area. Now, the thing that we talked about, and I mentioned in the email, is that tier 2 facilities are sort of co-located near substations because that's what works for them. Talking to some other folks who do battery storage, they said it's about $3 million a mile to run line from the battery storage facility to the power lines. So that's why these things tend to be located near the substations. So when we look at where we would allow these at in these commercial districts, none of our commercial districts are near the power lines. The power lines essentially run through the middle of town through the RA district. So as I said before, we may not see another one of these based on the location of them because they have to be by a substation. We don't see from the conversation I've had with Eversource with the expansion they're doing or upgrades of the power lines from Carver to Kingston that they're doing right now. There's not a proposed substation in those. No mention of additional substations in the larger study that Eversource is doing. Is basically putting everybody's solar project on hold about an additional substation in town. But nevertheless, we write bylaws just in case they happen. Although I don't know that we'll see another one of these, but the bylaw addresses both tier 2, the larger ones, and tier 1, the smaller ones. So with that, let's talk about zoning districts that these should be in, and let's get some consensus on that. so we can lock that down.
I don't think that SSID should be considered.
Okay.
That's my, the first thing that I see on there, that's the only thing that I have real issue with, is that SSID shouldn't be on for special permit. I mean, that whole area is already permitted.
I'm with you.
There's no reason for it.
I'm sorry, that whole area is what?
Permitted
For?
for construction already. They're already they're building all kinds of stuff all over there and everything else like that. There's no reason to include a tier 2 battery station over there.
I just wanted that to be clear.
So
So you can.
technically, there's 2 lots that have been approved for construction.
Right.
SSID.
Yes,
There's 6.
Right, I understand.
There's an A&R lot. So anyhow, just.
I understand
just
that, but it's, especially with regards to as close to, I mean, there's really, when you're talking about $3 million a mile, there's nothing even close to that thing, so there's.
Yeah. And like I said, we likely won't see one of these, but we want to zone them for, that thing that you may never see. So how do folks feel about in or out of SSID?
I don't see a necessary, I don't think it's necessary for a special permit to go to SSID.
So the option is a special permit or no.
No.
And like I said,
Well, Tom, how much land is left in that district that could be built out? They could have one of these on there.
well, there's plenty of land left out that hasn't been built on. In fact, in the research that I'm doing to correct our zoning map, there's actually another part of SSID zoning that goes off the site that never got changed on the map.
Okay.
It's 7 acres from an old solar field that was done off the solar way.
Right.
So the area is there, but the constraint to this
The
is
substation.
co-location to the substation
But there's nothing that says there couldn't be a substation built there at some point.
at some point. And if there is a substation built, let's say, in the middle of town, if someone wanted to put a battery storage facility on the site, they'd have to come back to the town and try to rezone that piece of property from residential agriculture to something else.
So I think we need to have.
If I could, just for the record, that Sarah Hewens walked in, and for the person taking the notes tonight, so that was Sarah that just spoke. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt, Steve.
No problem, Bruce. So I think we need to have a little bit more flexibility with, especially in an ag area. I mean, we may be able to put battery storage tier 2 very safely on a piece of property. So especially for the residential ag, I think that should be by special permit. And if it's not safe to put it in, it's not going to go in. But there is, I'm sure there's a situation where it can be done safely.
I think just, my feeling is you're gonna have a real hard time getting this to pass at town meeting. It's a real hot spot, and I think that it should be limited as much as possible to get this thing through.
And there's a tremendous amount of residential in that area that already abuts the SSID.
We're talking about residential agriculture.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about,
I know you're talking about residential agriculture, but as far as around SSID, there's a lot of residential that abuts that. And they're already, there's a lot of complaints about the construction that's happening there now as it is.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you were talking about, Steve, was that
I just don't want to know.
cranberry growers,
Yeah.
then, if they complied with all these setbacks in here,
Yeah.
would still not be allowed to put any tier 2.
Yeah, that's been a concern.
Well, and so to that point, some of the stuff that came out of Medway on the chart here is sort of scaling these things, benchmarking. So when we look at what a size of an energy storage facility might be, for comparison, say Cranberry Point is a 300 megawatt, is a tier 2. So that is in this line here that says investor-owned public utilities. And they have municipal-owned public utilities, which are, 50, 10 to 100 megawatt hours. For private landowners, they looked at, a typical private landowner, which might be a business, it might be a farm, something like that. Those are, 0.25 to 2 megawatt hours. And that says it, powers between, 17 to 270 houses. So my thought is if someone wants to do energy storage for agricultural purposes, because you've got, you're storing energy, make sure you've got money to run pumps or turn on heaters or whatever it is, I don't grow things. The facility that a farmer may be looking for is likely not at the threshold of a tier 2. It's likely more at the threshold of a tier 1, based on what I see. So that's why that's what I'm looking at as far as most things are going to be a tier 1 that come along.
So Fran, you think it wouldn't pass at the,
I think you're gonna get a lot of pushback from people if the tier 2, not the tier 1, but the tier 2 is in residential agricultural.
because I would not suggest that it be in a residence. I suggest that if it's a fairly big agricultural property and could be done safely, then I would be flexible with that.
But RAs altogether, you don't separate it out.
Well, that's why I'm saying if it was a...
You do by the tier.
Yeah.
Well, no, and that's why I'm saying tier 1 in RA, tier 2 only in industrial areas.
Yeah, I think for most agricultural uses, you're not going to see, like I
Well,
said,
it would be probably for energy production also.
now keep in mind that if someone has a solar development, it's
Those,
likely...
yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
concerned about those.
This is separate from that. But based on my understanding and the folks I've talked to, it looks like the thresholds for those things, that you would have tier 2 as your primary business, and you would have tier 1 as ancillary to ongoing operations.
But what if a cranberry grower wanted to have a tier 2 there for solar production?
Then, well, for solar,
I mean, for energy production, storage, energy storage.
then they have to go to town meeting and rezone their property.
That's what Steve...
Well, I think that's what he's talking about.
That's why I'm suggesting it be special permit, because there are situations where I think it would work. I'm certainly not going to put it close to houses.
The way the bylaw reads, it can go up to 200 feet from the property line with a special permit, so I agree with Fran.
So, I think a tier 2 isn't going to be a cranberry grower unless he's selling his land to somebody else to grow something or to do energy storage. And if they're going to do that, it likely needs to be in an area that's zoned for that. And so it'll be a 2-step process for that cranberry grower to say, yeah, I've got somebody who wants to do this thing, and then I'm going to come to town meeting on a petitioned article to say, I want to rezone X number of acres of my property to one of these zoning districts in order to do this. So it might be a 2-step process or something like that.
Would that be spot zoning?
Yeah.
Spot zoning is one of those things that people reference a lot. If there is, you can rezone a piece of property if it's consistent with public policy and doesn't benefit one individual. It's a fuzzy sort of definition, but we've seen it all over and over again from the Attorney General. So it would be unusual to see that, but if it conformed with a broader policy, maybe so. But I don't think we have a broader policy that says.
But wouldn't the proposal of a cranberry farmer wanting to rezone his property to allow tier 2, wouldn't that be to the benefit of that property owner?
And that's where, like I said, that's where we get into lawyers, but it would certainly, people certainly ask about that, and we'd certainly ask for the opinion from town council. But
It seems like it's almost impossible.
It also, when it comes to that, because the purpose of the tier 2 is to help stabilize the grid, it would be a benefit for a far larger group than just the individual.
That's what I'm getting at.
That's the point.
That's what I'm getting at, yeah.
So like I say, it's not beyond expectation, or beyond, the pale that someone could rezone a piece of property.
You said it's for the lawyers, so it'll be very expensive.
Well, we would use our lawyer with your tax money to ask that question about, is this a spot zone, if someone was to propose something like that. But obviously, that person who's proposing it would ask their lawyer beforehand. So yeah, well, lawyers got to eat too, apparently.
As I've said in the past, I want to keep every opportunity available to the farmer.
And I think the farmers are likely going to be in good shape with the tier 1 for those purposes. But if they want to go, if they basically want to, sell into the battery storage place, first off, are they located near a substation where somebody's even going to consider it? Because at $3 million a mile, that's serious money, apparently.
No, it'd have to be near a
Yeah,
substation.
but the only one we have is Cranberry Point. And at the current time, we don't have the prospects for another. And if one does, if a substation was to be created through Eversource or something like that, that's probably when we go back and have that conversation. There's now a substation, another substation in town. Should we go and take a look at a bigger picture about, should this area be considered for, or something like that? And of course, it depends on what's built out around it at the time.
No, I can see everybody's point. I can see
Exactly,
everybody's
exactly,
point.
yeah.
But, in the end, it's the Attorney General that's gonna make the final decision whether that's gonna fly or not. I mean, we can say what we want to say here, but the Attorney General will make the decision, so, and I don't know what that would be, because that takes out quite a area of Carver that may be under the power lines. And, see, Cranberry Point was in an RA, so I can see, but then I can see everybody's concerns too, from the residents, but, so, I guess I would just leave it as it's written here for now, and we'll,
I have to
Let's
go on
see.
record as voting against it.
okay. Well, I understand. I don't know how anybody else feels, and I can understand what Fran is saying too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do.
So, I mean, there's a lot of ways of looking at this thing. So I don't know what would happen, say, that we said that for something in the bylaws, it goes to town meeting and it's voted down. So where do we go from there?
They can change it on the floor. It can be changed on the floor.
It
Or
has to
could-
be advertised as written in the warrant.
So yes, things can change on the floor at town meeting. I recommend it 0% of the time to be doing wordsmithing on the floor at town meeting. How about we take this thing and move this thing?
Yeah.
That is a recipe for, some of the things we've seen in other towns.
So.
Money
what the-
articles can be lowered,
So-
but you hardly ever see a change in like detailed wording.
So if it wasn't accepted at town meeting, that would mean that we would have no bylaw for
No bylaw for batteries.
battery storage. So,
And frankly, what we've had before isn't much of a bylaw for battery storage.
Right.
No bylaw, just that one line.
Yeah.
We certainly have to fix that one line right now that says battery storage, special permit, and yes, in all the districts, because that just,
My take on this, Steve, is if you go with a tier 2 and an RA, the people who have a problem with Cranberry Point are going to say, what has changed? That's, and it is, there are some people out there very upset, as you know.
I know.
So, I mean, it's not in my backyard, so. So I just think you're gonna have a lot of blowback if you go with it in an RA, a tier 2.
It's not a yes in the RA, it's a special permit.
well, yeah, that's the thing, you're actually taking away the planning board's right to make the decision. And there is a lot of area in Carver where if there was another tier 2 in a cranberry grower's property, it would be far away from everybody and people wouldn't see it. So,
But as of late, anytime the planning board has a problem with a special permit, lawsuits ensue.
Now, with this, you could go to the ZBA with that, right? If you had a proposal.
No, I think that would be a use variance, because you're asking for a use that's not prohibited
Okay.
in that
Yeah.
district. And use variances are prohibited in Carver, as they should be everywhere.
I'm sorry, use variance is what?
Are not prohibited, there's no provision
Oh,
for
right.
use variances in Carver. So you don't get a pass from the ZBA for something like that.
Are we saying no special permit to get it through town meeting? Is that the basis of your point?
In the RA district.
In the RA district.
Just the
Yeah, I
tier 2?
understand.
Yeah.
Yep.
But what is the right thing to do?
I think if you look at what the sort of the characteristic of why people would do battery storage, it would be to make sure they have ongoing operations in the event that there was a loss of power or something like that. So, like I said, this wouldn't be your business running an energy storage facility. This would be ancillary to your operation.
So tier 2 is a business.
I understand.
In tier 1 is about,
Is an enhancement to your business,
is an enhancement, yeah.
if we can say.
but the talk is that beyond Cranberry Point, because it's next to the station, the electric station, that there wouldn't be another one of these
Yeah.
in Carver anyway, unless there was another station built by the electric company. So, whether we're talking about something that could never happen, I'm not sure, but you never know what's gonna happen in the future with the development of technology and things like that.
Would you foresee, if Eversource were to build another substation, do you think they would incorporate battery storage with that?
I don't know enough about substations other than don't jump the fence to be able to tell you that. But usually that's not a place where they're storing power, they're just moving it from one place to another, sort of.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, because they would get a free pass, basically.
A utility gets to do stuff.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's another option.
Could another one be put next to the substation, or could the one at the substation summarily be expanded?
I don't think you could put another one next to it because it won't be zoned for it. So if it doesn't say RA for tier 2, you couldn't put another one by the substation without rezoning the property. And as to what extent, they've got 6 acres right now that is going to be Cranberry Point. And I only know that because we did the...
Because I'm thinking that's what the real issue is with the people who are opposed to the tier 2.
I don't lean into too many things, but I would say don't tier 2 in RA, because it's 80% of Carver, and this creates a lot of potential for something that, like I said, may never happen, because that's a very real number, that, $3 million a mile. Even if it gets down to, you're going to get a 50% discount at $1.5 million a mile. That's a lot of development cost before you ever put a stake in the ground, buy concrete batteries, wires, fence, and all this sort of stuff.
Can we get back to John's original question first, or now, about the Innovation District?
Sure.
Can you put up that chart again that shows how much the Tier 1 does for private? So that goes up to 270 homes?
40,000.
Right, the private landowner.
Yeah.
Okay, so even at a full build-out of Spring Street, if they wanted to have the battery storage capacity that would fill that entire place, they would not be more than 270. If they wanted to have that whole Spring Street Innovation District have their own battery storage for everybody there, they would probably not exceed that 270 homes.
Yeah,
Correct.
And like I said, in the Spring Street Innovation District, if somebody wanted to have battery storage on their site, I'm gonna have a building, I'm gonna have a business, I'm gonna have battery storage as part of my business, that is gonna be a site plan with planning board.
I was thinking if someone bought a lot and said, I'm going to create battery storage for for everybody here, but that would still fall within the, probably the threshold of tier 1.
I don't really know what
Okay.
the demands for that would be.
Okay.
If it's, I don't know if, we've had the discussion, so I don't know if it's settled, and I don't want to change the subject. But my concerns with battery storage tier 1 is that it should be a special permit in the residential, village, and village business districts. It should undergo some sort of review.
It would go as site plan review.
Well, it's allowed by right in all 3 of those districts, and again,
But it still has to go through site plan review.
where does tier 1 is exempt, from my understanding.
No, that just means the use is allowed there. The Y is just the use, it doesn't mean it automatically goes, it has to go through site plan review.
Yeah, the only place it wouldn't come to the planning board for, is that residential use, if someone wants to add that.
So if it already has to go under site plan review, then for those 3 areas, then it shouldn't be an issue making it a special permit in regards to that.
So we're following Medway's model, but this is Carver. So
Right.
whatever the.
Because some of them are as big as tractor-trailer trucks, and that shouldn't be automatically allowed if it's just that.
Yeah, so there's tier 1. Here's our tier 1. There's the 1 megawatt. There's the half a megawatt, which is a 10 by, this is 20-foot container. This is a 10-foot container. And then we've got 200 kilowatt, 8 foot by 6 foot by 8 foot, 60 kilowatt, a cabinet is 8 foot by 3 foot by 8 foot. And then just for comparison, this is what residential battery storage is. So I just did this slide as well. So that's the smallest on the left there of what would be a tier 1, and that's essentially what a residential storage unit would look like in somebody's house.
What are the truck size ones? The first slide that you showed?
Approximately 1 megawatt.
20 to
1
5.
megawatt hour, 20-foot container.
And that's tier 1?
That's tier 1. That's as big as a tier 1
That's
gets.
as big as they get,
Yeah.
okay.
And like I said, the example I've used, consistent without asking Shaw's about this, is if somebody like Shaw's wanted to have a facility to make sure that all their refrigerators and freezers and things are working, so they didn't lose product in the event of a power outage. So to the effect of what is residential, that I just picked the Tesla because people are familiar with Tesla. That's a Tesla wall unit 2. It's 13.5 kilowatt hours. There's 1,000 kilowatt hours and a megawatt hour, so 74 of those would be 1 megawatt hour. The Powerwall cost about $12,850 according to this old house's website that I looked at. I didn't drink Tesla's Kool-Aid and get into their stuff. And Tesla will sell you up to 10 for your house if you have their solar panels. So just for comparison's sake, that's the difference in scale between what goes on in your house. And you see the size of it with the meter and a bicycle next to it. They're not very big, and they're essentially an appliance for your house, like a refrigerator would be. You have to comply with building code, fire code, electrical code to install one of those and require a permit.
Right, residential's not my concern. It's dropping some of these 10 foot by 8 foot or 20 foot by 8 foot, in a residential by right, just because you have the appropriate setbacks for it, and that might not necessarily be appropriate to the town or the neighbors, and I think it should require a special permit. And
Well, what if we had 3 tiers with the smaller 2, tier 1, this tier 2, which would require a special permit within those areas because of the size of the container, And then tier 3, which would be
Yeah.
commercial.
But the two smaller ones don't require site plan review at all.
No, those are residential, and I don't think that that's necessary.
That's just building
They're
code, fire
of that
code, electrical
size,
code.
that they can be appropriately handled.
Yeah.
But that's all lumped in tier 1 right
But
now.
isn't that the way the literature does it, Tom?
I-
Is that why we're calling it?
Correct, that's, and I said, we are trusting the good folks at Medway, and like I said, the reason I went there is because I'm familiar with the people who have developed the bylaw. Barbara San Andre, who's the planning director there, is an attorney who decided she didn't want an attorney anymore and became a planner, because this isn't where anybody can be a planner. But, you know, she's a very thoughtful, very good person at this. And Medway has spent 2 years and a boatload of money on, you know, sort of sketching this out. So that's why I have a lot of confidence in what we have from them. If we look at, coming back to the bylaw and say that,
It's just there in yellow, it said by right in all districts.
yeah, we're gonna get back to that. So if we look at changing what a tier 1 is,
Yeah.
and basically roll back what a tier 1 is, equal or less than, you know, 0.5 megawatt hours.
Either that or just put in, define what a home energy system is.
Tom, did the fire department have a concern about the 1 megawatt?
No, when I talked to Jesse, he said as long as I know what it is, what the chemistry is, and I can get to it, I don't have a problem with it. You know, the big issue that people have expressed a lot of concern about is thermal runaway and how people put these things out initially. So, you know, the technology has evolved to the point that there's monitoring of the gases that offset prior to thermal runaway. For those monitoring gases and knowing what medium to use to put the fire out has made a whole lot less of a problem with these sort of things. Where they use water is watering things down around outside to make sure nothing else catches on fire. But as far as what they use to actively fight a fire, it's the sensors that shut things down before we get to thermal runaway and using the right component. It's kind of like in the old days when they had those fire extinguishers that you tipped upside down and had water in it, so don't use it on a grease fire. The same sort of thing. It just took, you know, a few horrific fires for folks to figure that out and catch up. So I think looking at changing what a tier 1 is to 0.05, that gets you down to a 10 by 10 container.
Or less than 0.5 might be.
Yeah, yeah. So that both of those move up to tier 2. Right? Is that what you're thinking?
I just want to make sure that it has an appropriate level of review by the town and it's not automatically allowed by right, which is really what we're allowing at this point. Now, the solar companies, they use them as accessories. That goes through the site plan and special permit review. But for, other than that, it's, if we're gonna allow it by right and the town doesn't think it's appropriate, for instance, it should have, for something like the historic district should have input on anything like that that goes in the historic district for reasons of appropriateness. Let's say the dog mall at the end of the street wanted to put one in, or, and there's no screening there, but he's got the room and the setbacks.
Well, keep in mind, the historic district is typically dealt with, at least from the National Register of Historic Places, deals with what you can see from the street. So it's the facade of the building, what you can see from the street, and not what's in the building, that's what's behind the building. That's the typical sort of playground of the historic commission, based on the 7 in Falmouth. That
That's what ours are too.
Yeah.
Public way, visible from a public way.
So, less than 0.5 megawatt hours. So we now just move everything that's,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine with me, yeah.
Yeah.
all right? So, we have a bid on the floor to take tier 2s out of SSI.
We have to change tier 2 to greater than, or equal or greater than 0.5.
Yes, equal to or greater than, yeah.
Oh, in the definition of tier 2s.
Yeah.
Now, the SSID was supposed to be an innovation district, and I think that should allow some level of battery storage, but
Equal to or greater than 0.5.
so if we-
You can see Mavis Bacon and I have never met. For you kids watching at home, that's the lady who has the speed typing class.
You got your,
So close.
got that shift button, you're stuck on that
Look at
shift
it.
button there.
15th time is the charm.
And then,
So if we're changing this, then when it comes to SSID, some of those businesses might need them for backup, so it should be allowed by special permit.
Because we downsized what is tier 2.
But the intent for this is as accessory structures and not as,
And it does say special permit for that district.
Right. Yeah.
Now we can put special permit on RA.
it just rejected you all the way around, didn't it?
We're gonna go SP.
Yeah, just manual type, oh, no, it's mad at you.
Yes.
Nope. We need to bring Michelle in here. right?
We do.
Goodness,
I do,
You got
too.
it.
My wife loves it.
you hit a
I
function
Oh,
key
yeah.
somewhere,
Yeah.
it's stuck.
I try to put everything into Excel.
Swell. SP and SSID is what that says. All right, other districts?
Right down the line, Tom.
So right now, a tier 2 would be allowed by special permit in SSID, airport, IC, IB, IA, main business park.
But I agree with Steve, I think now that we've downsized what a tier 1 is and a tier 2, that a tier 2, some of the small ones need to be able to get a special permit in all the districts.
Oh, I thought we downsized it to identify what we felt
I thought we
was
were making another tier.
appropriate appropriate for a residential area.
Well, because you don't want the big 20-foot container, sitting in a residential area, but it might be appropriate in the general business zone. And right now, there's nothing in the general business zone for
It's green business park.
green business, whatever,
Right,
for a
right.
container. So you're limiting,
Green business is special permit.
Yeah. It's just the village business
Well, the
and
general business.
residential.
yeah, what's GB? That's not
General
general.
business.
It's a
Yeah,
general business.
general business is a no.
And one of the reasons that I looked
Maybe
at that,
adding the third category, way to go.
and one of the reasons I looked at that is, these are mostly industrial applications, and they really should be in industrial areas. So IA, IB, IC, SSID are those things that are more of that industrial sort of thing. If you decide to take your GB, your general business, and make it for something like this, general business really should be reserved for people who want to open a business, maybe want to be a barber shop or, dog groomer or whatever the case may be. That's really what the intent, I think, of general business is, to make sure that, we've got that district for those sort of uses. As they're identified.
But I think what your chart was saying was that half a megawatt hour handles 17 homes, so that's a considerable amount.
And that's an equivalency, but, is 17 homes the same as keeping the Quickie Mart beers cold?
Right, maybe Shaw's might need something of that size, but even then, I think that would be a real stretch.
A Well, I think Shaw's is, one of those power users or something like that, because with a lot of freezers and a lot of cooler space, they're probably gonna have, somebody like that's gonna have the most need for something like that, and most likely to make that investment. Because like I said, these things aren't cheap.
Now, what is Shaw's? Is Shaw's in the general business district?
I think it's in highway commercial.
Because I'm just saying, if it's a Shaw's and it's in GB, it can't have the 8 by 20 foot container now.
But even then, the Shaw's
Yeah,
wouldn't need more than half a megawatt hour. If you can run 17 homes, then I'm sure that that's appropriate for the level that,
Oh, I
It
know,
shows.
I have no idea.
And a farmer may be interested in a 1 megawatt.
Yeah.
right, yeah.
And so yes, Shaw's is right there, and it is in the highway commercial district.
All right, anything else?
So now we have to look at RA now.
Yeah,
Yeah, just that if 1 megawatt falls into agricultural opportunity.
Well, since we can't split residential and agriculture, because they're combined, I think we should make it special permit
Yep.
across the board,
Yep.
I think so too.
and let the
Planning.
person
But-
come
Let
Yeah.
planning-
come before the board.
yeah,
Yep.
that's the way I feel about most of all this stuff, but you're just tying
I
the
don't-
planning board's hands.
For sure, you can't allow tier at those levels in the villages.
But there wouldn't be any need for that, I don't think.
Then there would be no
Or any
need to
SWAT
change.
do it.
Then there would be no need to change the classification.
In VB and D?
VB and V,
That's why I said 3 tiers.
All right, so
Yeah.
change them in RA and GB to special permit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now you're going back to where we were before, where
Right.
the largest can go onto a residential
With-
agricultural.
Fran's original point, I think, is what should be achieved. The tier 1 you changed to under 0.5.
so if
Then
you
new tier
change,
2 would be 0.5 to, was it under 1
One.
or including 1? And then just change this tier 2 to tier 3. So then leave what is currently tier 2 becomes tier 3 as is. So the RA would be an N. Tier 2 would be the special permit, so it could still happen, but get some oversight. The tier 1, which was just the residential, stays yes. That's what you were, and can I commend you, it made me feel good. You had said you live nowhere near the big one. You said not in my backyard, but you still cared. And I've worked with people on boards that have said the complete opposite. So I commend you and I thank you for saying that and believing that.
so if we identify tier 1 as home usage as less than 0.5 megawatts, if that's the definition of it, then yeah, I would think that the classification system could be moved up in that direction, yes.
Well, that's what we just changed it to,
Well-
but we didn't add a third tier. Right now, the way we
Right.
just did it is that anything under 0.5 is their tier 1.
Right, but then, yeah, so,
Tier 2 is 0.5 to 1. And then
Okay.
tier 3
Tier
is
3 would be-
over 1.
Okay.
That way the farmer
Could have
would
the
get a special
opportunity.
permit. Yeah.
Yep.
So we want to,
So
and I'm not
are
going
we-
to try to fix
are
this
we-
on the screen, so we're going to, we're talking about adding a tier 3.
Yes, and that's over 1
So
megawatt.
tier 3 is going to be current tier 2.
Correct.
Yes.
And tier 2 is going to be that sweet spot between 0.5 and 1.
Right.
Yep.
And I'm looking at the zoning map and Shaw's is highway commercial.
What is business? Give me the information on business. Thank you.
General business is the red.
Well, here's your zoning map right here.
Oh, yeah, that's what I pulled up. There you go, it's bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shaw's is an inset on the right, up at the top right.
Highway commercial.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
All right, so we're adding a tier 3. Yeah, we're gonna put those others in midst of tier 2, and we're gonna come back to the proposed new section. That's one road. And so we currently are back at tier 1, are allowed by right in all zoning districts.
And that would be, yeah.
Sweet. All right, so here's our table. Tier 1, all those districts. Tier 2, which is now tier 3,
Yeah.
just like that. And then tier 2 will be,
The in-between values, all special permit,
Correct.
right?
Now, tier 2 would be a special permit in RA and GB,
Okay.
and only no in VB and V, correct?
RA and VB special permit.
That's correct.
That sounds right, right?
Yeah. And then tier 3 is what you have here.
Okay? All right?
Now, as far as that goes, section 3590.5 on page 2 will have to be adjusted to say tier 2.
3590, where's,
3590.5 on page 2. I think it's the opening paragraph there, yeah, a little lower. It should be tier 2 and tier 3 battery energy storage systems.
Actually, they're mentioned in all of the points under there, even on page 3. The tiers are mentioned in almost every.
Well, you're
Search
just
and
gonna,
replace.
right, but,
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying, but we have to go in.
because we're adding a tier, so it's gotta, tier 2, tier 3's gotta be added to everything.
Yes.
It's the one that's stapled together.
I did the ball, though.
It's,
It would drive me crap crazy.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
That's not it.
they make it hard for you to miss it. All righty.
Under number 5, in that category, 3590.5. After it says if within a building, it says between best components and all buildings. Does that make sense anymore, if we're talking about things that are just within a building?
now,
Where are you?
I would think components mean the parts of,
Right, but it says a minimum of 10 feet must be maintained if within a building between all buildings. So I don't understand what that means. If it's already in a building, it's going to be 10 feet away from another building.
It would be, and it needs to be 10 feet away from all those other things, the stacked storage, combustible storage.
Right, so I'm just thinking buildings can come out there. Within the building, no, not there, below. Between best components and all stored combustible materials. Leave all.
I'll let you say that one more time.
Just take that word buildings out, right where it is. Right. Yeah, I think that's right. Do we want to add 10 feet
I would, I would,
between walls? Between,
I was gonna say, I would recommend that any best components be stored in a different, at least a different room. If it's gonna be within a building, at least within a different room than hazardous material.
Well, that gets the building code.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, if I may, Rod Palmer, I think a lot of that would be governed by the fire prevention regulations, and if you create something in your bylaw that's different from that, it would be omitted from the Attorney General's office. So I think most of those concerns that you might have would be taken care of with the fire prevention regulations. They might be quite a bit more strict than that. So.
And they keep amending those.
They do, yeah.
NFP 855 has been changed a couple times over the last year based on this sort of stuff.
With the evolution of energy storage, the regulations are constantly evolving. So, and they're doing a pretty good job in keeping up with that.
So on, just a question on 5 while we're on it.
Yes, ma'am.
It says tier 1 and it goes on, then it says tier 2. Wouldn't that be,
That's going to be tier 3 at this point.
right? Tier 3 and then under, well, no, 6 would be tier 3. So would the setbacks for tier 1 be tier 1 and tier 2?
Yep.
Okay.
And so dimensions.
And then tier 3 best. Yep. And then under 6-dimensional, instead of tier 2, it should be tier 3.
I managed to change that one less than half an hour for him. Like that.
And then in 7, tier 2 should be, well, all throughout.
Yep. Everywhere I got it
Yeah.
to John's point, I'm going to just replace some of those tier 2s and tier 3s.
Well, everywhere it says tier 2 should be added tier 3, not changed.
Because tier 3 still needs some kind of setback, because it's allowed in some places, right?
Yeah, so essentially everything in the bylaw right now that says tier 2 is going to be tier 3 as we go through.
And everything that says tier 1 should be tier 1 and tier 2.
That's my understanding. Okay.
And they're all.
Well, for instance, like number 8, screening and visibility should include tier 2 and tier 3.
Okay, so you're saying tier 2 goes to tier 3. More than
not-
tier
Not
1.
everywhere.
Not
Each
everything.
one's different.
Right, some of them are separated out, like 5 we separated out, but
Yep,
for things like screening and visibility,
it should be 2
they
and
should
3.
both be screened
Yeah,
and,
so we got tier 2 and tier 3 for screening and visibility. And I'll go through and fact check that. So at this point, we've done exactly what Solomon would do. We split the baby in half, we made tier 2 and tier 3. We've added the screening components. Plugged in the fire department's concerns about things like that. I've still got a few things to go back through and amend to clean up the language is a little confusing in there.
now, do we require training be provided for our fire department in regards to?
Absolutely.
I don't recall off the top of my head, do we require a list of hazardous materials and material safety data sheets?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
that was in there.
Okay,
Yep.
I want to make sure
Budget
those
in the
are
last.
provided for the fire department too. Warning lights, some of these use oxygen deprivation systems, is that correct? Halon and CO2
Well, the
systems.
monitoring systems, are monitoring for those off gases that.
Well, if a fireman shows up, is there an exterior warning so that the door isn't open?
Yeah, there's
That's the one-
signage
oh,
and stuff.
Well, signage, but if there's a thermal runaway or an issue inside, and it activates halon or CO2, or there's fire inside, there has to be some warning for the person coming up to the door.
And this is one of the reasons that, in talking with Jesse previously about that, for Cranberry Point, where they didn't want it in a building, they wanted individual pods, so you didn't have that one containment system that might have a problem inside a building. So they're all isolated outside and not within a building.
Because I remember requesting it for a solar project, that they have warning lights so that nobody enters to see if there's an issue or problem.
And that gets back once again to the fire code and electrical code as well. So we're comfortable enough as the camel who put this thing together.
I have one other
Yes, sir.
change, 3590.7, the ownership, the last line. It should read, "and meet with any permitting authority from which the original applicant received a permit."
That makes it,
Fine, yeah.
that makes it very clear.
Something like that. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. So at this point, we're reporting these on to the Attorney General, to the Town Council. Regulations, the draft regulations will be in the Town Clerk's office when the ad comes out Friday, advertising the zoning hearings for March 7th. So we want to take a vote on 3590, just wrap it up for the time being. This is our last scheduled meeting, not to say that we won't have another meeting, because we've got some minutes and some other things to do. But do we want to, does that make sense?
I'll make a motion that we approve 3590 battery energy storage systems bylaws as amended.
I'll second that.
So I have a motion by Savory Moore, second by Sarah Hewens. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote by roll call. We'll start with John Gatsky.
John Gasky says aye.
Jim Bogart says no.
Bruce Mackey, aye.
Fran Mello says aye.
Cornelia Shea says aye.
Savory Moore says aye.
Steve Ward, aye.
Sarah Ewan says aye.
Roger Shores, aye.
That's the majority. Thank you all. So let's go back to our table. So here we have our table of uses. And like I said, we're going to add a tier 3 to this. Sight unseen, are you guys comfortable with me adding a tier 3 to that? And these are the definitions. These are just the definitions from Midway. So usually when, I like to put definitions in the definition section rather than have them spread all over the bylaw. So these will be additional definitions that we'll plug into Article 5, which is in the zoning bylaw for those definitions. So these are the definitions straight out of there. The only one that we added that wasn't in Midway's was the direct abutter, an owner of property shown in the most recent taxable list is adjacent to the properties that seek a permit. Other than that, everything else is from Midway's property. So are we comfortable enough with the use table and the definitions? Use table has to be amended.
The only question I have about the use table is the innovation district for tier 3. Tier 2 is becoming tier 3. Do we want the innovation district in tier 3?
Correct, I would say no.
I would say no.
I don't think we need it.
Okay.
I don't think we will need it.
So that's the one that, so it will be in tier 2, but it won't be in tier 3.
So tier 3. John, you know how hard it worked to get that SP back?
I know. Sorry about
I
that.
watched the struggle.
You were
It was real.
You were seeing the flop sweat from right here. So that's going to be tier 3, that's a no, and SSID will be included in the tier 2 chart.
Yes.
Yeah, with an SP.
Okay, and with that, can we close the books on the use chart?
Well, just to make sure on tier 2, village business and village are still gonna remain no, correct? Everything else will be special permit?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Then I'm,
so in
it's
tier
good with
2,
me.
say that once again for me, Tony. So in tier 2,
Everything is special permit except for village business and village, which are a no.
special permit, all districts except
V and VB.
VB.
And V.
So the
And
question that I have with regards
Or
to
no.
these things, are we anticipating businesses all around to start adding batteries to their businesses? Is that why we're thinking about this?
Well, a gas generator as opposed to the equivalent in a battery maybe, right? Some businesses are gonna go that direction.
If prices come down, more people are gonna go that direction, especially.
I was just wondering, I mean, I don't know too many businesses that have a generator backing up other than like Shaw's and
Right.
some of the really big stuff.
Right.
Well, if you get into like manufacturing and hopefully we get some biotech or pharmaceutical or hospital or healthcare, then you might be looking in that direction.
Yeah, you have to prepare, you know.
Hmm.
Because that's really
It's
what
the
we're
way it's
hoping to
going.
encourage to come to this
Yep.
town is, you know, some of the higher end educational.
Yeah, there's a sort of a nice discussion in the residential battery storage about, you know, why would you consider something like this? Why would you consider it, and the cost of the storage make financial sense? So it kind of delves into that. But like I said, at some point, you know, they may be cheaper, but right now, I mean, you're making a significant investment if you're putting something like this in your property.
All right, so we need a motion to approve the,
Amended use table and battery storage definitions.
okay.
I'll make the motion as stated.
Sarah Ewens will second.
Okay, Connie Shay made the motion, Sarah, you in second. Further discussion? Seeing none, let's do a roll call vote, please. John?
I apologize, what are we voting on now?
The use table and the definitions.
John Gasky says aye.
Jim Bogart says aye.
Bruce Mackey, aye.
Fran Mello, aye.
Connie Shay, aye.
Savory Moore, aye.
Steve Wood, no.
Sarah Ewens, aye.
Roger Shores, no.
All right.
Roger Shores.
We did change the
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
For tier 2.
tier 2, which goes up to 1 megawatt.
No, yeah, tier 2 special permit, yeah.
No vote bullying.
But no, I'm still, I'm good with
No
no.
vote bullying.
I'm
The free country.
good with no. I'm good with no.
Okay.
So solar. Kind of what started this thing up. So changes to.
Friend's suggestion, so it's still the tier 2, the old tier 2. The old tier 2 is tier 3, and that's the one I want to special permit.
No, but tier 2 goes up to 1 megawatt. But this is better.
I'm just gonna think of this close up.
This one, make sure that yeah,
So here for ground mounted large scale, we included the clean energy language about permitting or guidelines for DOER and DEP. We had introduced site plans, so this was some changes in the required documents. So Connie had put together a list of documents from, I think it was from Webster,
Webster, Brewster,
not Brewster, Webster.
Webster.
And we also had our list of required documents. So what I did is I just paired them together. I went through the list from Brewster, looked what we already had in our bylaw here, and just got rid of the duplicates. So those existing conditions, property lines, proposed changes in landscape, locations of public water supply, proposed surveys of the site, blueprints or drawings is something we already had in our bylaw. Documenting the major systems, that's already in our bylaw. Landscaping plans, diagrams of sight lines, construction stormwater, post-installation stormwater. Prior to the issuance of the building permit, provided the building inspector and special permit granting authority those safety data sheets that we talked about before for all materials. And those other items were things that were already in our bylaw. So those are the things that were in previously that I wanted out in red. Included repair and replacement of non-functioning panels, direct butters. So we think we're at glare, which is where we sort of left off at last time. We had this discussion about what Mass DEP's document said about glare, about its reflection being, minimal and comparable to a pond or something like that. So the language I think that Connie had suggested also from Brewster that solar PV shall be positioned in a way that there's no possibility of glare on a residence or public way at any time during the day. I think that sort of absolutist language is probably problematic.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, typically that language would say something like, should be positioned in a way that glare is minimized to the extent practicable from a residence or public way.
That's fine. Again, this one just came off of, wasn't Brewster, it wasn't Webster, it was one of the western towns.
And I don't know who invented practicable, but I've been using it ever since it was invented. So solar PV modules will be positioned in a way that minimizes glare to the greatest practicable extent. On a residence or public way.
Is it practical or possible? Practical says that it's a good thing.
Practicable. So practical, like I said, practicable is that word that people just fall in love with. And it sort of means, we tried as hard as we could, but dude, this is all we could do. And that's not my standard, by the way. That's people who really know what they're doing and work hard at things. They're much more practical things. But I think that's just, that kind of language is probably going to fall by the wayside. So let's just make it practicable. And I think, so mitigation measures. So these are the mitigation measures that Connie also brought to us. We didn't really have much of a discussion about them.
Well, the first one was when we had it set at 2 acres, and it could be raised to 6 acres, but between 2 and 6, it referenced mitigation measures. So if we're gonna set it at 5, then the maximum, then that there's no, I don't think the A part is necessary.
Yeah, 30% or up to 5 acres. Yeah, they seem to be contradictory.
All right.
But you left out not more, the word more than 30%.
Yes, I had that
Oh,
written down.
sorry.
No, I had it
Sorry.
written down as to be,
Oh,
and it
okay.
wasn't, that wasn't one I had,
So there's supposed to be a more there?
yeah.
Sorry.
No, it wasn't. I noticed it too when I was reading it.
So the mitigation measures are gonna be taken out?
I would think mitigation for A should be taken out because that was, when it was 2 acres, it required mitigation if we were going to increase it up to 6 acres.
Right.
And again, I thought 4 times was a little excessive, but that was the language that was copied and pasted.
So we got rid of A, so
Yep.
mitigation is loss of forest habitat within the installation. If forest land is proposed to be converted to, and we're gonna change that to our initials rather than their initials. The plan shall show mitigation measures to create a wildflower meadow habitat within or immediately around large-scale environmental solar and the successional forest habitat in the surrounding area managed to prevent shading until the installation is decommissioned in the site restored to forest. That sounds like a perfectly reasonable thing.
I'm good with that.
Are we saying that the remaining land cannot be used until decommissioning, is that what it's saying?
No.
This just says plant, you gotta plant pollinator wildflower species, right? That's how I understood it.
Me too.
Are you asking where those have to be planted?
I want to make sure that the land, that 70% is not essentially made into a conservation easement, because want to make sure that the landowner can use that property in some other way.
No, this just says if you're gonna clear forest land, that wildflower meadow habitat should be established where the panels are
And I
gonna.
don't mind doing the pollinator habitat right inside
Yeah.
the solar panels. That'd be a great idea. Thinking about doing that.
I'm guessing that bugs and bees like wildflowers, but I'm just going to put pollinator species in there, really, just to development suspenders. And like I said, the folks at the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth have done a great job with this. I have shared their list of pollinator species with everybody we've employed around planning board stuff for a couple of things, campground and other places. Just don't plant pretty stuff, plant pretty stuff that has some function for birds and bees. And so it can't be, you talk about the birds and bees, but strictly as pollinator species and nothing else. It's campground was. So.
Definitely no invasive species.
And I think those are the principal things that we sort of had outstanding for large-scale ground mounted solar.
Tom, under control of vegetation, it's still that repair and replacement of non-functional panels. Is that out of there?
Where are you at, Steve?
That says,
3580.33.
oh, 3.
I think it's just got copied and pasted there.
So that's an operation and maintenance plan.
Yeah, no, this is, it's written under 3580.33.
Oh, 3.3, I'm sorry. I said 3.3. I did math, I'd be an engineer, not a planner.
So what was your question?
It just has, it talks about the repair.
Oh.
And it just, it got misplaced.
Okay.
Yeah, that last
Oh, that?
phrase, yeah, doesn't seem to go there.
That looks like perfectly natural. It doesn't have a capital, it's got a comma at the end.
Right, I thought you were talking about
No.
35,
Well, that's what,
23.
we want the
which is-
agricultural pesticide bureau to replace that stuff, right?
So, yeah, fat fingers on the
Yeah,
keyboard.
it's like Rod said, it's already regulated, so
All right.
we'll let the pesticide bureau do that.
All right. So I think we've covered most of the things we talked about. Adjusting the setbacks, clearing, maximizing the extra space, setbacks, direct abutters. And as I said before, and I'll say it in the planning board hearings, and I'll say it at town meetings, and I'll say it here, as far as solar goes, we have a very narrow lane to operate in. The AGs put their thumb on the scale, and if you decide to go turn your bylaw upside down, it's likely going to get kicked out by the AG, and you're going to have just exactly what you have now. I mean, they do line item things and say, no, you can't do that. But I think what we put together is reasonable and practical, and I would like to think that the AG would go, nice job. But we'll see. But like I said, the thought that somebody's like, this is all wrong, the work these people did, let's throw it out and make this new thing, I think it's going to get kicked back by the AG, and you're going to have what you have now.
Under, excuse me, under 3580.50 at the end, abandonment or decommissioning, I think we should add a language that mimics the change in ownership that we have in the energy storage.
3850?
Yeah, somewhere in there we have all, we should add one more.
So that's abandonment. or decommissioning?
Well, somewhere, change of ownership. We don't have anything in here regarding change of ownership and going to the,
I thought we added that.
that was in battery storage.
No, I thought it was in
No, I
here
thought-
too.
Was it?
Oh, I hadn't noticed, but
Hold on.
I've been looking through it, I don't see it.
So the LG owner, we're gonna keep all that stuff in place. Service property, let's see what's got for owners. Annual reporting, owner operator submit an annual report. Owner operator shall notify the planning board by certified mail the proposed, that's decommissioning stuff. Abandonment.
Well, if it's there, we don't need it. If it's not there, we do.
What's 3580.51?
What's that?
3580.51,
Yeah.
in that area there.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
3580.51. So likely,
We can put the same language,
yeah, I'm gonna look the exact same language.
then we're consistent.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what Tom said.
So I would change the headline of 3580.5 to read, change of ownership, comma, abandonment or decommissioning.
35,
The header, right there, .5 was 50.
Colon. Change of ownership, colon.
Yeah, change of ownership. No, that goes before abandonment. Because that would come first. Change of ownership,
Colon.
colon. Abandonment or decommissioning.
and so we're gonna steal that language we had in battery storage. That thing?
Yeah. We should probably make sure that the language is correct. There's things in there about special permits,
Yeah,
but
I'm gonna
it's the
address-
gist of it.
I'm gonna address it.
now, should we include something that says the cost of decommissioning should be reassessed if there is a change in ownership at that time?
Wouldn't that go with the original
Don't
contract?
we have that in there anyway, right? That they have to reassess every number of years.
I don't see it in here, that's why I was asking.
Under annual reporting?
We had it somewhere.
Well, I don't want, it shouldn't have to be happening like every year, but, you know,
I think that we have that built in though, that they have to,
Which shall include a mechanism for calculating increased removal costs due to inflation.
Right, but
3580.53.
that's the initial financial surety, but say 10 years down the line, we close the hazardous material site or we don't accept it any longer. Because who knows what the cost of disposing of hazardous materials is gonna go. We're already stuck with all the nuclear material over in Plymouth because the federal government shut down their
I have to run people. I've got another meeting.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Bye.
Yeah, I got right too.
So,
Savory more votes, aye.
so financial surety. bond in the event of removal, install or remediate, in the amount determined by the planning board, reasoned by the treasurer. In no event should be less than 75% or exceed more than 125% of the cost of removal in compliance with additional requirements set forth. Such surety will not be required for municipal or state-owned projects. Project proponent shall submit fully inclusive estimate of the cost associated with removal prepared by a qualified expert for the mechanism for calculating increased removal cost due to inflation. Financial surety may also be used to replace and maintain all landscape and vegetation, all costs incurred by the town for maintenance.
Right, so if I was thinking of change of ownership, that if it gets sold, that the new owners should have an idea and not be depending on, it should be reassessed by our engineers if there's a change of ownership.
I'm hearing out exactly how that works.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't have an account to do that, though. See, you set up an account to review plans for site plan, special permit, and you
Right, but
have an account for that,
if
but
there's
this
a-
is
if there's
years
a-
down the line.
If the cost of decommissioning goes up, and now all of a sudden, with the money that they've put into a bond or is now below that, because we're estimating the cost of decommissioning in 25 or 30 years. Now, at best, that's just an estimate. We can't account for circumstances that might happen in that might drive up the cost of the recycling or removal or disposal.
Well, keep in mind, that's a cost borne on them disposing it. Typically, the decommissioning plans I've seen, the cost that we see in that is the cost for them to remove that equipment from the site and restore the site.
Sure.
What's on their nickel for finding a site to dispose of it properly, it falls to them and their risk. So most of the decommissioning plans I've seen is about restoring the site to the site that it is.
Well, I think what I'm trying to get at is that
In the event of abandonment. versus
at 29 years, if somebody walks away because it's gonna cost them $1 million to dispose of it all, and the financial surety we got was $250,000, and then all of a sudden you're bankrupt, you go broke and walk away from it. That's kind of my
I hear
concern.
that.
But isn't that why you have the phrase in there, shall include a mechanism for calculating increased removal costs due to inflation?
That's for the initial bond.
Right,
It's-
but that means that the bond is reviewed to
Yeah.
make sure that it meets
I know.
current costs.
I'll take your word for it. I thought the mechanism was you multiply what you think it's gonna be by the expected increase in costs over a period of time for the initial bond. So
Well,
if
well, the
we're
mechanism that I
estimating
was-
the cost is gonna be $100,000 today, the financial mechanism would be what, 2% maybe is maybe expected cost growth over,
It says, in no event to be less than 75%, nor to exceed more than 125% of the cost of removal
okay.
and
But,
compliance.
right, at what point is it reassessed to say all of a sudden that the $100,000 you put in for financial security is now
Right, this is-
67%
This is where I
of
was,
the decommissioning
where I
cost?
think a recommendation was for it to be reviewed every 5 years. To make sure that the bond is keeping up with costs.
Yeah, let me ask town council about that,
Mhm.
because it sort of sounds like changing somebody's permit after it's issued.
Yeah, yeah.
To say,
Yeah.
so let me, if I
Well,
can.
well, the argument would be we require financial assurance of the removal, and that in order to do that, we should at some point be able to reassess that they're still within the requirements that, but I think 5 years is probably too much. I was thinking 10 years or change of ownership.
Is that my question for town council? Can we
Enough.
reassess the decommissioning amount? Properly spelled, and perfectly removed?
No.
Or, right. After 10 years or with a change of ownership. or within 10 years of the expected lifespan.
Like that, after X years, maybe 10, or change of ownership.
We're gonna have to get you a
Yeah,
keyboard.
if I wind up on TikTok, I know where you go to meetings at, I don't know where you live, but, all right, that's our question.
Need his keyboard up here, Dave, so you can-
Yeah, these things don't match up very well with laptops. All right, so we're gonna add the ownership change.
Either or, I mean, because most likely, as the production value of these systems starts to go down, then the initial owners might consider selling it off. I just want to make sure that the town is not stuck holding the bag.
Okay.
Okay, so that's something that you're going to ask town
Yeah.
council.
So we're gonna plug in the ownership changes here, as we talked about, and I'll ask, because I said, as of sometime late tonight when I finish all the final edits, I'm sending them to town council to say, here's the stuff we're sending into the clerk. We've got a hearing coming up on the 7th, and I will ask town council to attend the hearing on the 7th as well, just so we've got some sort of quarterbacking from council as we're having this public discussion with folks at the hearings. Anything else?
Okay, so you want to vote on this? Are we ready?
These are the changes to 3580 large-scale ground-mounted solar PV installation proposed by the Solar and Battery Storage Committee.
So if you're willing, I would make a motion to accept the large-scale ground-mounted solar voltaic installation, section 3580 inclusive, as edited,
For
As amended.
as amended.
Okay.
I'll
Thank you.
second that.
Okay, so we have a motion from Connie Shea, a second by Sarah Hewins. Just for the record, Roger Shores and Savory Moore have gone off to other meetings, so we still have a quorum. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's start with John.
John Gasky says aye.
Jen Bogart, no?
Bruce Mackey, aye.
Fran Mello, aye.
Connie Shea says aye.
Steve Ward, aye.
Sarah Ewan says aye.
So that's all but Jan. All right. So going back to my notes, we have talked about the bylaws, changes, the districts, that we're going to put those in. So I want to talk about a couple other things that we put together that, as part of my research that we posted on the web. So this is EPRI, as I pointed out in my email, is an organization that I ran into. I talked to some people who I know very well who were in the battery business. Talked about my daughter before, without sounding like a proud papa or anything. She's a chemical engineer. She worked for Lockheed Martin in their advanced energy storage lab to create flow batteries. So she now works for another company, Electric Hydrogen, trying to create, that's enough about her, because I talked about her now. So anyhow, I asked her about, do you have some resources I might talk to about this industry-wise? So she introduced me to EPRI, where a colleague of hers worked, and so we met with them. I met with them back in August or so when we first started this to get a little insight into some of these things. So they referenced a couple of different things. So a couple of the things that I put out on the website is this is about what residential battery storage is about. So it kind of tells a story about what's up with residential storage. So that's one of the things we added to the website. Another thing that we had come across is some of the technical reviews that these folks have done over the years. This is it's a 78-page document about energy storage reference to fire hazard mitigation analysis, and this was done in December 2021. So this is essentially what folks are looking at as far as figure these things out. We talk about how this thing keeps evolving. So this group, following a series of energy storage incidents in 2018 and 2019, the Energy Storage Integration Council engaged the Safety Task Force to highlight current industry gaps and challenges related to safety. After finding few public assessments of energy storage fire causes, consequences, and mitigation, the task force engaged industry expertise to develop a set of reference hazard mitigation analysis, resulting diagrams illustrate likely failure modes for the generic energy storage, which may help to curb and eliminate these hazards, and applying a bow tie approach that links hazards and eventual effects through barriers. This report details those sort of things, and it goes on for 78 pages. There are some glorious charts and things like that in the document. Just for those people who are rightly concerned about the potential for energy runoff, this is just one of those documents that they put together. It sort of talks about what they went through in looking at and developing the regulations. So I added that on our website. In addition to this other thing from EPI about proactive first responders engagement in battery energy storage. So both of these things, all these that I had found through them, I forwarded on to once again to Jesse to make sure he's in the loop with that and didn't have any problems with those sort of things. So those are the things we just plugged in on the website so folks can go and take a look at finding a bit more about battery storage and energy storage. The other things that I added were some of the documents that Medway had put together about battery energy storage facilities. This particular one from February of 2022 is research and summary practices, and the other one is citing guideline from May 2022. I added these because I said we're benefiting from Medway's work and their relatively recent documents, and just to add a little background to those people who really hate TV and just want to read stuff on the internet. It's pretty good stuff. I read most of it. Some parts I'm like, I'll have to ask somebody who's smarter than me. And there's a lot of people like that to figure out what that part meant. But I just want to let you guys know that these are things that we plugged in there just to provide some background for folks who want to do a bit more deep reading on what the current efforts by the folks we've been stealing stuff for, what sort of basis is some of those decisions that we made. And I think that's really what I had for tonight, but I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. I said I am sending this stuff after I finish editing it to council so they can review, and planning board hearings begin on March 7th. In the training room at the Carver Fire Department, or Carver Police Department, right next door, on the other side of the library. The 7th and 8th are the 2 dates that the planning board is looking at. We confirmed that the building's available on the 7th and 8th. So we'll get through as many of those as we can over those days, and if we have to continue to an additional date, we'll look at that on the 8th, when that continuation date might be. So that's what I had for.
Okay. So I think we've covered everything else. You had concerns expressed by the committee members about solar and battery storage, but I think we've already gone through those. We had the current state of solar development in Carver.
It looks like the planner's working on that, doesn't it?
I think you've been busy doing other things.
And it's still on the list.
Well, there is a list that I have, I think I've given to you.
Yeah.
I think it's been posted to the
Yeah,
public that we have
wanted to go back
20.
through and just make sure that that's all.
20 solar panel systems and large-scale systems in town, and I must say, other than one that you see during the wintertime, not far from down the street, most of these you don't even see. So I think the plan.
We have that many.
I-
I didn't realize we had
Yeah,
that many.
I mean, when you think of it, I think they've been screened properly, they've been put in areas of cranberry bogs and where people don't see them. So I think, all in all, that things have worked out very well for screening the solar and hiding it, so people don't see it, for those people that are offended by the solar projects.
Yeah, I noticed one down on 58 off of South Carver. The rays aren't located there on the side street, it doesn't come to mind, but you can see them from 58 as you're heading southbound. And that's likely one that they should have done a little better job screening at and putting some plant materials. I can't tell you which one it is, but when I drive down to the Berry Guys to get my sandwich, on occasion, I've noticed that it's screened probably from the front, but for whatever reason, the side looks like it's, they probably should have had some additional plantings at that time, but most of them, like I said, are pushed back where you don't see them. But that was one that I noticed that probably could have used the benefit of some screening along the west side.
That's been completed. There's supposed to be additional, I haven't driven by there, but the projects where they had the poles were taken out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all gonna be screened along the highway there for quite a long distance.
And-
Bermed and planted with trees on top.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that particular project. So Gary Flattery, our conservation agent, provided me with a report from the removal of those poles. And I meant to get to it and get a copy of that, because it's 300 pages. But the take-home point was from that study, and I said I'll get it to you, is that they found really only one or maybe two areas where there was any contaminants found in the soil, and that was where one of the poles was broken when they were taking it out. And so the level of introducing anything from those poles was around that one pole that got, so there might have been two of them, but essentially the de minimis discovery of anything in the soil around that from when those poles were in, because I know that's a concern that people have about if somebody puts something in the ground like that, to what extent does that contamination travel? And in this case, they were there for a long, long time. They were there for a few months, but they essentially traveled. I'm not going to quote fingertips without looking at the report, but it was comforting to know that what happened down there and what came out was a de minimis amount of stuff. In fact, almost negligible. But I'll get that.
Right, no, I've read that report too. And
You've got more time on your hands than I do. Well,
I'm still very busy though.
Okay. So that was the only other thing I wanted to point out since you mentioned those.
Yes, yeah. All right, thank you for that information. All right, we don't have any additional meeting minutes.
We do not. Mary Ann is working on them for us, and as we have them, we'll bring them in, we'll bring the group back. One of the other things that Jill and I were talking about today is there are two sets of minutes from the predecessor of this group, the zoning bylaw committee. And so there are two sets of outstanding minutes from that. And looking at who was at that meeting, there were 5 people who were on this committee who were on the previous committee. So what I'd like to do, and 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who the 5th one was. But we've got a quorum of folks who can look at those 2 sets of minutes and remove them from, what was that, 2020?
Okay.
Y'all are,
It was a while back, yeah, I forget who was here.
yeah. You guys are young and sharp and you can remember all that stuff.
Yeah, 2021, December,
I think it's
2021.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, Jim?
Yeah,
You
we
were on
did
that.
that.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I knew.
Yeah.
Okay, so when would our next meetings be?
Well, right now, we don't have one scheduled. If we want to sit down again in February. It certainly would not be next week.
Right.
So I'm guessing that we're likely looking at a March meeting after Marion has a chance to put together some minutes and things like that.
So do you want to contact the members here to, when you do? I mean, we've done all the important work right now that we were supposed to, and we'll have something ready for the KP Law to review, and then it will go on to the planning board for the public meetings. And then from there to, I mean, so, yeah, okay. So all we basically have to do now is just go through the minutes and approve any minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
And if there's anything that kind of comes up, we might, put our heads together about something. But I think at this point, you guys have done, a very good job with this. I appreciate you being patient with me about getting all of this stuff out. And it's in the planning board's hands now to make whatever amendments come out of those hearings and the town meeting. But I'll say it as I've said it every time. We've got a narrow lane, and if somebody decides, we're gonna pitch all this stuff and make a new solar bylaw, then we do that at our peril. There are some, I think I sent you guys the petitioned articles. So there are several petitioned articles about solar. I don't have them at the tip of my tongue, but one was about a moratorium, I think, for dual use. One was about getting rid of some of those reduced setbacks. I frankly don't remember what the others were, but they're advertised and they'll be at the meetings as well.
Okay. Anything else anybody would like to say? I'd just like to thank everybody for doing this for all the weeks and, showing up here every week on Wednesdays, a couple times a month anyway. So, and I think we have done a good job. I mean, we've created a bylaw for the energy storage systems. And I think we've greatly improved the solar, some of the points that needed to be clarified. I think we've done some good work. And I'd also like to thank Tom Bott for doing all this. I know that he's been busy between the planning board and doing this and other committies.
But I'm the one who gets paid to be here, you guys don't, so this matter.
Yeah.
Rod gets paid tonight.
Well, we thank you anyway.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and without your guidance, and I could never, I mean, I'm just a two-finger typer. I couldn't even set up the TV, so it's great to have somebody that can do that, and I'm happy that that you can do that, so not everybody can. Oh, so having said that, I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Cornelius Shea, so motions.
Second.
Okay, so.
That goes to Fran.
Okay, so a motion by Mr. Shea, second by Fran Mello. Those in favor? We'll start with John, yeah, we'll just.
Aye.
Jen Bogart, aye?
Bruce Mackey, aye.
Fran Mello, aye.
Connie Shea, aye.
Steve Ward, aye.
Sarah Helen's aye.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you. Good night, everyone.